derivations at national and international levels, and having a number of publications in the reputed journals published from India and abroad. Today we'll speak on evolution of drug history from 3rd century BC to 3rd century CE. So, on behalf of the ICHR, I formally welcome sir. Please give him a big hand.
A very good morning to all of you. In fact, even yesterday itself we had a brief interaction here and there when we were going through the exhibits at the National Museum. Today, before I get into real business, as he said, the evolution other aspect will be dealt in the afternoon session. Now, I think all of you have the abstracts on hand, which was sent well in advance. I have said the multi-dimensional approach to epigraphy, or in other words, to put it in simple terms, importance of epigraphy. Because since this workshop, I chose very broad-based lectures, not going into any specific aspect of epigraphy. As you know, it's a very, very vast area. Epigraphy, in a day, we can't deal with the whole subject, but this, what I am going to deal with is a very, very basic aspect of epigraphy, just to create more interest. And as all of you know, whether it is the students of the Institute of Archaeology or any participants of the workshop, a sort of sustained interest is required. It's not after 24th when you, after the validity, not to forget the subject, coming over, interacting. It's all good. As friends, you deliberate, interact. But after that, how far you carry forward whatever you have learned all these days is very, very important. Otherwise, successive batches will come and go on, and whether it is any organization they do such workshop, it will have a very, very temporary effect. So, as I keep telling, in fact, as very serious research students, I would like to really know, when you visit a monument, how you look into a monument from the epigraphical point of view. You go to a very big monument, you may appreciate the art, architecture, everything. Have any one of you seen? Of course, when you visit southern India, no problem. From all around you find the inscription running around, whether it is Tanjavur or Srirangam or any such big temple. But in the North Indian context, when you go to temple, have you specifically seen when you go to Lingara temple or any temple for that matter, are there any inscriptions which says about the temple? How many of you have seen from the epigraphical point of view? Just I would like to know. Or just going around the monument, yes, you have come back. No, that should not be the case. Now, with this background, not only the temple, when you go to an unknown region, you should find out whether any ruins, any epigraphs are there. Because I said there is a sharp decline in our epigraphical collection after the 60s, or to some extent the 80s, 90s. Because I don't want to blame any organization for that matter. Because of various reasons, there are not many assistants in the election level to carry on this huge task. But many of you are in the different organizations like assistant archaeologists, and you can also look forward for certain epigraphs, document it, and you can inform the directorate epigraphy and all, so that they can also, because with few persons working here and there, definitely it's very impossible to country of this magnitude to cover each and every corner. So, when you go back, is the message you have to convey. Take it to perhaps when you teach other batches. And there is a great need to create faculties in the field of epigraphy and numismatics. Once I was invited MS University Baroda, of course, because long back I have mentioned in my presidential letters also, if you just go two and a half decades back, name a university there is an epigraphist, whether in Kerala or any part of the country, even including Northeast. There were eminent epigraphists in chosen area. Now it's very difficult. Hardly some archaeologists from different faculties, they managed to conduct some few classes. Yesterday one of the participants was really, what to say, except in Karnataka, 2 universities, they are having a diploma course in epigraphy. And of course, some NGOs like REACH and others, they are having some workshops or Jnana Pravaha like that. There are some institutions, even thanks to Bihar Heritage Society, periodically they do conduct some refresher courses. But what I mean, in a larger extent, it's an involvement from the public also. The ASI alone cannot be held responsible for the premier organization like epigraphy to look into it. But each and every history department, ancient history and archaeology department should come forward to have a course in epigraphy. Initially it will start with a certificate course in epigraphy for a few months. Later it can be extended to a diploma course or PGDA, like that you can keep improving. But why they are not taking? One of the suggestions they have sought for from the SHR to be forwarded to the culture minister. Have written it up. And the second part, I would like to rather read out from my presidential letters, which focuses, because you are not just students, you are serious research scholars who have to understand the problems and prospects of epigraphy too. Because tomorrow when you become faculty members of archaeology or anything, you have to look into these things. So with that, and before that, there are certain major incidents. When Professor Agrawal reminded me, the last, when the ASI celebrated its 150th year, Mysore branch as well as Nagpur conducted jointly some exhibition of calligraphy. Of course, Dr. Mani prompted me to look into from the Sanskrit inscriptions. Earlier, calligraphy was confined to Arabic and Persian inscriptions alone. Later, he asked me to look into beautiful calligraphical specimens from our Sanskrit inscriptions or even early inscriptions, even in different languages, and to make a good exhibition. So we were quite successful, and we could explore from that point of view. Especially, I tell you, from 6th to 8th century, all over India. Predominantly when we have the Siddhamatrika character, we have excellent, beautiful specimens of inscriptions, which are very, very important from the calligraphical aspect. In fact, one can do research on this aspect also. So, with that keeping in view, I have brought some brochures. You please to all the because in my presidential address I have gone very deep in detail. I would like to give the topic, xerox it and give to all the participants also. Another event, of course, I have very few copies. I can't, you may have to xerox and keep the Galaxy of Epigraphists. This epigraphy branch, 125 years. unfortunately, the 100 years of Vivek branch could not be celebrated. We did for the 125 years of Epigraphy branch. We have brought some 2 brochures. You can Xerox later, and starting from Hulsh to all the epigraphies are included. And this also, along with that, mainly to highlight the importance of epigraphy. I have brought this. What are do's and don'ts? See, under awareness program, a huge amount is spent from the Archaeological Survey of India. As for the epigraphy branch also, we do conduct a lot of exhibits, take it to high school level, at different level, and we want to this also do.
So do please go through this. And as I was mentioning, even we had made handouts also. As of course I don't have a copy, just this just like handouts for high school children to know what is epigraphy, what is the antiquity of writing in ancient world and antiquity of writing in India, ancient script, like that languages. In very broad terms, we have made this handouts just to reach the high school children also to know what epigraphy means.
So do you have spare copies? Circulated.
Of course, it's all how future you can think, in whatever way you can contribute, especially those students earlier when I used to attend in the Institute of Archaeology also. When I would go to their respective places, spread the awareness about preserving our heritage that I was often mentioning. With this brief approach, now I would like to get into the epigraphy as such. As I told, it's a very vast subject. Now, already some days are over and you have listened to eminent historians, archaeologists and epigraphists addressing you. And what I found, bit of focus on calligraphical aspects required. Anyway, that can be done in the next series. I will give this presidential address also because it's very important. I will skip over this calligraphical aspects, is not required, but I will take 10 minutes to read out because all the aspects have touched upon here about the problems and prospects of epigraphy. So you can also later read, and I will also have the satisfaction of having read before you what I want to convey. In view of my long association with Epigraph branch of the Archaeological Survey of India, in view of my long association with Epigraph branch of the Archaeological Survey of India and study of inscriptions, I thought it would be befitting on this occasion to put forth before the distinguished scholars and epigraphists some problems and perspectives of the epigraphical studies which my predecessors too voiced on many occasions.
the primary question that occurs to our mind is, the epigraphical study has received due attention it deserves, if not why. Knowing well the great importance of epigraphy in understanding our glorious past, why the inscriptions as a whole is being neglected or ignored. It is quite evident that there has been a setback to this discipline of epigraphy, especially in the recent years. Why it has failed to achieve the much expected growth. The foremost reason for the present situation is that the tribe of epigraphists is dwindling at a faster pace, and there is greater failure in creating second and third line of scholars. In spite of viewing the situation periodically, much headway could not be made, basically because certain issues remain unaddressed by persons at the helm of affairs. Keeping the above facts in view, I am going to place some of my views which are totally new to the, not totally new to the scholars, but it only requires a focused attention and certain amount of prioritization and reorientation of certain aspects connected with it in giving facelift to the discipline of epigraphy. As we know, our predecessors have built a strong edifice of epigraphy, and we have to strengthen it without losing much time. Otherwise, time is not far to see building edifice crumbling down. For all the critical situation what we are facing today, it's mainly because we have failed to address certain issues on the priority basis. To redress this issue, remedy is not far to seek. Only we have to turn back or revisit the situation what it was 3 decades ago. Just see, it was there. I am going to narrate some of my initiative or exertions made to revive or strengthen the discipline of epigraphy. A couple of years before, a review meeting took place to analyze and understand the reason behind waning interest in the field of epigraphy confined by former Secretary Culture and headed by Mrs. Kapila Vatsya. The chairperson of the meeting, attended by various heads connected with education. Where I too was part of it, of course, the main focus of the meeting was how to revitalize and revive interest in the study of epigraphy, and there was a general view that there need to be a reorientation of epigraphical studies, particularly with reference to epigraphy, and of course offered and taught in different universities, and also to introduce the subject wherever it is not present. Definitely it was a good move as a first step in the direction, but subsequently action initiated is not known. So periodical reviews are required to know about the status of epigraphy, and there is a great need to bring more and more students into the realm of epigraphy and to create a sustained interest. This I have been emphatically telling. Say after you leave, at least keep reading one article either from Epigraphy Indica. There are so many journals. At least make it a point a day, either to read something or go through a facsimile and try to decipher yourself, and you have to engage yourself at least half an hour amidst your other, you may be from different streams, archaeology or history, pro-history, any part of the archaeology, but they have to devote. Otherwise, this is such a discipline, you will forget it. Here you practice Brahmi, after a few months, you will forget it, the basic concept. So a sustained effort is required as far as epigraphy is concerned to know. So I will skip over certain aspects here. Further, as mentioned above, the universities having the Department of Ancient History and Archaeology should review and revise their syllabus with regard to epigraphy and numismatics. What I have seen is 50 years before, what syllabus they have given nowadays. And systematically the note given is passed on to the next faculty to faculty, and they are teaching. I have they are not abreast in, keeping with the new trends, and as we know in the archaeology, why not they do with regard to epigraphy? What they secretly preserve all the earlier notes and they just divulge it. And practical aspects connect with the field of epigraphy, like field work and stampaging of inscriptions is very much required. Research scholars should be prompted to take up research in the field of epigraphy and numismatics other than archaeology. Apart from epigraphy being taught as one of the subjects, there need to be certificate and diploma courses in epigraphy for greater understanding of the subject. What I understand, there is a great dearth of faculties who can teach epigraphy, calligraphy and numismatics, which also needs to be addressed. There is a great need to target young scholars who have inclination to know about our tradition, culture and heritage. By arranging photo exhibition of inscriptions, this all is a commonly known. Specifically now, so to spearhead the cause of epigraphy, there is a greater need of participation of private agencies like Jnana Pravaha or any other. Many NGOs can come forward. See, it is, if you have a person, resourceful person, you can fund it. Why government alone should take up? Heritage is a common thing to be shared by the public, by all. So don't expect government alone to work on this. If a real person who can do this, he can also take up this job of spreading epigraphy. So short-term epigraphy, calligraphy are new or few organizers who are actively engaged in teaching epigraphy. One such is Reach in Chennai, which has been teaching Tamil Brahmi and Tamil epigraphy other than different aspects of archaeology, like Jnana Pravaha at Varanasi, Mythic Society at Bangalore, Bihar Heritage Society, Patna, are offering vocational courses in epigraphy. Similarly, many more organizations should come forward to teach epigraphy, and larger participation is required from different states so that they can specialize in the script and the language of the area from where they came. Suppose you are from Kashmir area, they should try to specialize in Sharda script. Somebody from Proto-Bengal, that region, they have to, somebody from Assam, because they are acquainted with the language. It is not the modern language. They can easily understand the language some 200, 300 years what prevailed. If Manipuri speaker people can easily go to earlier phase and understand the scope of the subject of the language. So the regional basis, why I am emphasizing, those who come from that area, it's very easy to understand, because certain terms, it is connected with the ethnicity of the local populace, so they can better interpret the terms. And another thing, while I was taking a stampaging note, it's very, very important for us to take the best stampings or very good photographs, because research scholars or historians to a large extent depend upon the epigraphists to give the basic source material. If your reading is wrong, the entire interpretation goes wrong, everything will derive. So, at least you give the perfect, try to give the perfect decipherment of the inscription as far as possible. Somebody may reread it and decipher, improve it. But your responsibility is to give the exact, as far as good reading, decipherment. Then interpretation is another aspect. You may interpret a particular term in a different way, and another person may do. That is a different aspect. You can debate or discuss over there, that aspect. But if basic decipherment, some term is read wrong, it will upset the whole system. So, a proper decipherment is required. When it comes to some good technical terms, it may be a tax term or it may be a dignitary. So, a perfect, good decipherment is absolutely essential for a good. You may take more time. Why people are sustaining an epigraphy? There are mind-boggling inscriptions. You have to spend 10 to 15 days to decipher an inscription. An archaeologist who hold an object
what's a terracotta object, the measure, length or whatever, he will do it easily. A potsherd he can examine easily. But to be an epigraphist, you should be a multidisciplinary person, having good background of mythology, Pali, Prakrit, Sanskrit, and grammar, and tradition, culture, whatnot. So, history. With all that, one can be a very sound, efficient epigraphist. If you are only giving a lopsided, a particular portion of that one, but you should try to equip in all the aspects. That's how DC Sarkar and Das, I want to take his name, because such a great person can never born again. I can say. Such a prolific writer, and you might have read when Sankalia told it, you can call it as Epigraphia Sarkarika. Because very volume you see earlier, it was all written by DC Sarkar, and there were great luminaries like B.B. Mirashi and all, they used to debate and write another article challenging his views. Now where are the persons? When I present an article in a conference, it simply goes accepted. How, unless you have the knowledge of history, you can discuss or debate over it. Without the knowledge, you will say, yes, you will accept my reading. If you are a thorough epigraphist, you will challenge me. What you will say, sir, it's wrong. So that should be your ability, and you should have the, in those contemporary days, there were giants were there who used to debate and discuss. If Sarkar writes, next Mirashi used to write another article challenging his views. So we have to have that. As students, I am emphasizing with my past experience. I am just a speck in that. I can't compare with anybody else, but only have a passion to dissipate the knowledge what our predecessors had. Because I have seen great luminaries, V.S. Pathak, so many, Professor Mukherjee, great people addressing and attentively listening. I have seen in the epigraphical conferences, Professor Mukherjee used to occupy the front chair with a notes and pen. He used to take minutely all the points, and later a young scholar also used to appreciate. So such was the greatness of those scholars. So it may be out of this one, but these are very essential for you. That's why I am emphasizing certain things, which others may not be able to give their experiences like that. Because being in the branch more than 35 years, I have my own way of viewing things and submitting before. As mentioned above, I am reiterating that special mention may be made with regard to Professor T.P. Verma and his students who have made immense contribution in the area of calligraphy. But for him, in the post-independent India, there was no work on calligraphy except Dani or Shivaram Murthy or few earlier scholars. Only it's T.P. Verma who could, Professor Upasak being the first student who could write on Brahmi. Subsequently now we have A.K. Singh from Gwalior who did on Nagari script. There are many students whom he prompted him to take Gangarajan Gupta, and they substantially worked in the area of calligraphy. So this is the line of school from T.P. Verma, and really great master that area. The major problem when we have to address in North Indian gathering is they expect Hindi. It's a big task. Even in Karnataka, they want I should give lectures in Kannada. It's a big problem sometimes. So there is a need to examine inscriptions of each region state-wise and bring out comprehensive work on calligraphy. Now with the availability of large inscriptions and technology, one can produce more comprehensive work on calligraphy. Earlier scholars, they did only on line drawings. Now you have excellent technology of photographing. You can be more precise in defining a letter. Earlier they had to see an inscription and do that. And now with more precision you can place letters. It is often said that epigraphy is an endangered discipline, like endangered species. More so when it comes to regional languages and scripts. Here particularly mention may be made with regard to inscriptions from northeast region. Manipur, I have copied 30 inscriptions. To this day I have not been able to decipher, because I am looking for some scholar who can do that. Nobody has that knowledge. If you go to Central Institute of Indian Languages, they know only modern Manipuri. A person who knows the ancient is, that persons are not there now. The delay in this, had we conducted workshops like this some 22 decades back or 3 decades before, we would have had all resources from different regions. Now, how to look for Kaul Diambi or specific persons, Dharmeshwar Chutia, like that, we had very eminent epigraphers from Northeast. Now we don't have. Of course, Professor S.K. Acharya is there, who is also come from Orissa, is a very committed, very scholar. I emulate, I would wish to say, the student should follow the Orissan inscriptions, what he has made. Further, all the different regions should be taken on the same pattern. You can build up region-wise calligraphical charts. To decipher a Manipuri, knowledge of early Manipuri is a desideratum. Unfortunately, today, expertise in India has become a rare commodity. That's what I have to say. So there is an urgent need to look for some more resource persons who have specialization in Manipuri, which is quite different from modern Manipuri language. Another aspect which I would like to mention is we should turn our attention to lesser known scripts like epigraphies, young epigraphies. Apart from decipher editing inscriptions and Brahmin derivatives, including me, I say, we depended on that. Why not some of you take up Kharoshti and others? Should try to familiarize themselves with the major scripts like Kharoshti. Perhaps after Professor B.N. Mukherjee, some of his disciples, very less exertion is made by others to gain the skill in deciphering Kharoshti inscriptions. Similarly, also in the case of shell character inscriptions, which also needs a thorough documentation, decipherment. Now, somebody interested, we have documented, but even an annual report also we said in the remark column only as shell character inscription. So, documentation, so far how many we have done, and what is the scope? Can we prepare any calligraphical chart for its shell characters? These are the things we have to look into and examine in the light of Professor Mukherjee's enunciation or what he has done. So yesterday I was telling, one of my observations is that decipherment of Indus script, which I mentioned yesterday also, young scholars should come to the arena of deciphering Indus script. Other areas, some more exertion is required. The Sharada script, its derivatives like Devasesha and Takri. There are other subscripts, from Sharada like Devasesha, Takri, which are prevalent in Himachal, Kenya. Also in the Deccan Modi script, many are not expert in Modi. We have many inscriptions. Modi script.
From which area, sir?
Maharashtra, Deccan. So I heard even Ahmedabad, not Ahmedabad, Aurangabad, Ahmednagar, there is a curator who is expert in Modi script. So it's very difficult to trace a person who has some expertise in this.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, could you repeat these names of these regional variations? You took 2-3 names.
Yeah, that is first is Sharada script, and then Takri. Takri. T-A-D-A-K-R-I. In the Himachal.
Where is Devasesha?
Devasesha.
Devasesha is where?
That is also in
Himachal.
Himachal.
And Takri is also Himachal.
Yeah.
Takri.
Deva Sesha.
Takri.
D-A-K-N-R-I. These are all the sub-derivatives from Sharda script.
So what was of the Manipuri that you said? The term for ancient Manipuri?
No, there is no term. It is Manipuri only. The present people doesn't know the ancient Manipuri language. It is 300 years only, not very old. But they say we are not conversant with this epigraphical language. What is written we can't say. Even religion people, they don't know. But they have inscriptions. You are from which region? No, you are from
Thailand.
Thailand. So, apart from this, in the same context, I would like to add that there are large number of inscriptions, local dialects, belonging to medieval and late medieval period. Suppose you have Sanskrit epigraphies from 13th century. You see, we have large number of inscriptions later also. 13th century to 16th century, or even late. When you look into the annual report, we say local dialects, whether from UP or Central India, Bihar or any part. Huh?
Godi tribes.
Godi. Which region?
Central India. Godi tribes.
Godi. Oh. I am not. How long? I mean, what is the? Is it how many years old?
So it's actually existed was before the Kalcharis, but as a tribe, they are considered more after the independence. They have been in existence before the Kalcharis as in their own kingdom,
Okay.
but we don't get their inscription or anything. But we do get their reference in other cultures.
No, I have no idea. But
No, also I think because they were tribes.
No, they weren't tribes. Later on, people started considering as a
Achha,
tribe.
they were ethnographically
Technically,
termed
they
as.
were the aboriginals of the area, and later the people after the independence they were starting to be considered as the biggest tribe in India.
yeah.
But what we get from the knowledge of other contemporary societies is that they were in existence and they had their own political and other system, which wasn't parallel though. But they were there, and the other thing that we get is that a lot of the
Good.
things.
No. Such things, you can come out with the presentation in the Epigraphical Society of India, where, see, now you may look in a different aspect, certain regional languages which has a history, that can be really brought out. But anyway, it's a good suggestion.
So I couldn't find its evidence.
Yeah. Similarly, we say Chambyali. When you go to Chamba region, it is written in Takari. The language is Chambyali. See, they are not even conversant with Hindi. You should know the regional language to impress them to know. Wagadi is another, when you, the Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh and this region, we have Wagadi. When three states, they come together, the country you have another region language or something coming like that. So these are the things we have to look into that, redefine the whole thing.
No, it is
Wagadi is a
a
language.
The language.
So like this you may encounter, you may come across many such things. So what I would like to see is a person coming from Bihar and an inscription coming from that region, he can decipher, interpret the inscription in a better manner than a regular Sanskritist. So you at Bihar may know who come from that region. I may be a good Sanskrit, but I am brought up in Karnataka. I don't know many of the terminologies which even in later, you may be loose, and you can easily relate it to the particular inscription and interpret it in proper. So such terms are many. So we have Sanskrit only we are taking. Why not the local dialect which started appearing in many inscriptions are 14, 15, many inscriptions are there in abundance. But if I give you a local dialect, I can decipher it, but certain terms I can't define. So region-wise, if I speak from Bihar, UP, or Central India, particular region, you have come from your childhood, listening to many terms and terminology, which they have tried to use in earlier instruction also. You can interpret it. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
See, this happens, merely interpretation is important. If you just text it, what is that? I can't convey to other public. That knowledge is not that useful. So this I am emphasizing because nobody earlier mentioned. Even our calligraphic charts ends with 12th century. Why not later? You may see some letter ja in different forms in later local dialect inscription. Because it is not very crudely engraved, you may not take much interest. Further, each lot of variations you find in the local script also. Nagari written in different form in Central India, in Bihar, UP and all. That you can make another state. All calligraphers are confined only to 12th century or maximum 13th century. Or they come to Nandinagari or Nagari like that little later. But this is an area you can see and look from the calligraphical point of view also. So it helps a lot in building up the macro level, regional history. When a lot of inscriptions are there in the local dialects, that's very important. So apart from that, I have also mentioned, as we all know, along with the culture, tradition, the script to travel foreign countries now, because she is adapting, trying to learn some Cambodian, Nagari, those scripts with from Southeast Asian background. So it's good, such efforts are required. After mastering this, you can try to look earlier scholars what they have written we are doing. But we are seeing Cambodia, conservation is work, every work is going on. Why not the survey is involving another epigraphist in the conservation work or taking as a part of the team? If they look only from the conservation, from the archaeological point of view, why not from the epigraphy point? When huge inscriptions are there, lot of texts are there, can't we review the text written by earlier scholars? We can definitely do it. So that point is very essential when there is a huge corpus of inscriptions from Southeast Asia. Because at that point of time, the conference was dedicated in the name of Dr. K.V. Ramesh.
This conference.
No, this particular case.
When was which year was this?
This was last January in Harvard. So I have wrapped up, concluded saying, finally I would like to wrap up my address by stating that one of the views of Dr. K.V. Ramesh, for whom the conference is dedicated and who is always remembered for the great efforts he made to take ahead the discipline of epigraphy. One of the foremost things that was in his mind was there should be a mission for epigraphy, like manuscripts. He used to tell there should be a mission for epigraphy. Hundreds and thousands of inscriptions are still lying. What survey conducted is nothing. Are we going to village to village and doing? No. There should be, he said, the mass awareness. Everyone should reach in every corner of India so that we can retrieve the glorious past material. So that often used to rise in Kaaba, that the mission for epigraphy should be like for manuscripts and other. We want that on war footing we should take up the uphill task of preserving and protecting our inscription, so to realize this great objective for which we stood for. So we should all strive together so that we can pass on our great epigraphical heritage to the posterity. Now itself there are fortunately only what stamp pages we have in Mysore is only because many stones have disappeared. 100 years what they copied after 60 years. Now it may be lying in a field, they might have used for a culvert or some other building material. When I visited Malhar, practically I should say it's a heritage village. Every village, every house has some antiquity, either as a door frame used in somewhere, some concept or the other. Lot of ruins are. I used to often mention, when you go to a country like Germany and all, they value even 100 years. When you stumble, you get an antiquity, you don't bother. Which is so much, India has so much of thing, we never care. But that too in abroad, they take so much pains to preserve and conserve it. Tomorrow you have to tell only the books, not the original epigraphs. Your children, when you take around the museum, there may not be original stones left. Perhaps you have to show the corpus of volume and show these are the inscriptions that are available. So, better we try our level best to preserve. Let us take it as a collective responsibility instead of pointing any organization, it is not so. Whatever possible from your end, you can try to convey whatever possible effectively, so that all efforts which ICHR is making, we are making, it will be fruitful. So with this I will go with I think this is a very important message. I would like to pass it on, because we are all not school children, or already you are going to take up different positions. So this message is very important that I will tell you. Now, please. I have said multi-dimensional approach. In other words, you can say it as important. Why I am telling when you look back, either the Epigrapha Indica or the earlier articles, or prior to independence, or in the 50s or 60s, the main focus, whenever they tried to decipher an inscription, they only saw the inscription from the point of political history. That was the requirement. So they just saw the whatever new king, new dynasty, and dates, chronology. That only they saw, and the other aspects, they put it in the background. And subsequently, many scholars have started viewing from the cultural point of view, sociological point of view, economic point of view. There are many, many aspects. So that at the outset an inscription may appear like a donative inscription. There may not be much of things. But if you go deeper into the epigraphs, you can find many more aspects coming. Because once a foreigner came and asked about the perfumery in ancient India, I told, what reference you will get about perfumery? There may be few, but he made a lot of efforts to get a lot of Gandakuti, so many earlier records he could make some material. So like that, if any thought on any subject comes to you, you look from the epigraphical point of view, try to get more information. That's what I I would like to often take our Madhavan Katti's word, former director, like Banochishtam Jagat Sarvam. He used to say Shasanochishtam Jagat Sarvam. See, if under sun and moon anything is there, it's all represented, reflected in inscriptions. At times I have gone a bit forward. If an artifact is a body, epigraphy is soul of archaeology, I used to tell. Because it speaks to you. It is what is there in mind, they have just reflected in the inscription. It can be little, maybe more exaggeration, but I could say it is a soul. How you would know in the 3rd century or century, just you will see a monument or some sculpture, but the inscription comes out what is within, the art or the engraver, what was. Next, please. So it is India is singular rich in epigraphical wealth that everybody knows. More than 1 lakh stamp pages have been discovered, but many more are there. See, when I conduct epigraphical survey, I have covered almost all in my 3.5 decades, almost all over India. Earlier days I didn't visit Jammu Kashmir, later I visited also. because of the advent of Muslims, you may not find as intact the inscriptions as you find in South. Unfortunately, many monuments are, when you say Arjuna and all, it runs ruins to several kilometers. So it is the onslaught, unfortunately, the Muslims that went and rampage and they destroyed all our literary inscriptions. When you go to Thar or when you, any monument for that matter, there are, it may be in fragmentary nature, but it is one of the main reasons. Often question arises, why in South India quite inscriptions are intact and we get lot of inscriptions from South. When you view from the northern point of view, you may conduct 30 days epigraphical survey, come with only some 3-4 inscriptions. I have gone deep into the forest and found some in Chhindwara and forest region. It's very difficult, but it's inevitable. You have to go. Now, if archaeologists and epigraphists, they work in tandem, I think they can also do archaeological point of view, epigraphical point of view also can be covered, and lot more inscriptions can come to light. Absolutely. Yeah, next please. So, still a large number of inscriptions. Unfortunately, our reports are becoming very thin these days because of so many reasons, paucity of non-filling of posts. As rightly said, the Lucknow 3-4 posts are there, and last 2 years before it was referred and not able to fill up the post. But the delay, that doesn't bother. How many inscriptions we lose, they should look into it. There may be so many technical difficulties, administrative problems, but the government should understand if we lose time, how much material we lose. See, they may take decades to amend an RR, but many senior persons will retire. What they will do with that? The government should take a special view with regard to some special subjects like epigraphy. Archaeology has the resilience to withstand anything, but not epigraphy. It's already in a very bad shape. Next. So as you understand very well, right from the history up to medieval period, we have a lot of inscriptions. Next please. So it's only here I would like to say large enough connected into construction of not only political, dynastically, but also social, administrative and cultural history of a particular period region could be made, could be undertaken. This very important aspect. Now many works are coming. I don't know how many of you are able to take up epigraphy based researches. See, that's important. You may have interest, but something in the form of publication. If you take up, please look from the cultural aspect. Already people are writing. See, many books have come, but still at the macro level, many studies has to be done. So you collect the epigraphs and they do region-wise for different aspects. Let there be more epigraphical publications in the form of hardly there when you look for book review, you get hardly 1 or 2 in a year when you have to say something. Next please. So this only to introduce you, all of you may be aware. Those who are not, I am just telling them. Next please. See this majority, as you have seen in the National Museum yesterday, we could see some pedestal inscription, some pillar inscriptions. So they are lithic stone inscriptions and copper plates. They are in majority. But apart from that, when we are looking from the wooden gallery yesterday, I mentioned to one of the students, we have an inscription engraved on wood, Kirari inscription, which is at present preserved in Nagpur. So such rare instances, this you can just as well find in D.C. Sarkar's Indian epigraphy book. When you see the illustration, there is an inscription on conch, there is an inscription on brick. Apart from copper plate, they used gold, silver sheets and all. So other than, and when you visit a place like Ajanta Ellora, you have painted inscriptions. So in the extended sense, literally if you go, it's not engraving alone. When you say in the extended sense, it can go to a painted inscription. So I also say, when you please document those inscriptions from Ajanta, the painted inscription, there are one or two which runs to 2-3 more lines also. But an attempt is required to decipher them. Next, please. No, this font has not come. When you read epigraphy, Indian epigraphy book written by Dr. K.V. Ramesh, I hope already you must have been reading book written by Solomon, a book written by, I am not going to give any bibliography. All basic books you are supposed to read. And Indian epigraphy written by D.C. Sarkar long back, it holds good like Achandrarka. See, that is the way, the large footnotes with a book of so simple lucid style, keeping mainly in view the students. It's a wonderful book. And all the aspects, majority of whether you take administrative terms or in terms of any other aspect, Sarkar has dealt in the required manner. Of course, now there is a requirement also, another textbook which I am trying to aim at, keeping calligraphy and other aspects. So this Shasana has two, Raja Shasana, Royal Charter, and Tamar Shasana. Royal Charter engraved on copper plates. Though we could not have occasion to see in National Museum, I hope in different museums you might have seen copper plates preserved. See, mostly later inscriptions. Even some early, the normal later inscriptions will be single plate. Early inscriptions will be in 2-3 plates or any number of plates. It will be strung with a king and C. Its size varies. As I told yesterday, for the benefit of those who are not there, earlier this Karandai was the largest plate available with 65 plates. Karandai.
From where, sir?
It's Tamil Nadu. Karandai, Tanjavur. And another plate is Indalur copper plate, which has got 82 leaves. Huge copper plate. Tanjavur.
Sir, 82 one is which one?
Indalur copper plate of Rajaraja II. Indalur. Thiru Indalur, it is prefixed Thiru Indalur. Indalur. I'm not going, but at present available when you get an occasion to visit Egmore Museum, Chennai, you can see it's a huge, very huge copper plate. It already published from Tamil Nadu Archaeology Department. It has got very great Sanskrit portion as well as Tamil portion. When I come to language and scripts next session, I would like to elaborate on it. Next, please. Raja Shasanas are classified under heads. Next. As you know, Dana Shasana is a very commonly met with. So and so image is gifted by so and so bhikkhuni, or the stupa, or some stamba, anything. It's a large number of inscriptions are donative nature, and Prasada Shasana recording various kinds of favor a king makes. That is called prasad. Prasad is what you accept, yes. And Jayapatra declaring victory over the parties. That is another. Next, please. Yeah. Krayashasana. That is business view.
So which one?
Kraya.
Jayapatra is
Kraya.
victory, certificate of victory.
Another is Yupa Shasana. Many of you might have heard Yupa. Yupa is a thing, earlier Vedic period. A sacrificial animal used to be tied and sacrificed. Yupas. Yupa is a sacrificial pillar. In India, adjoining UP and Rajasthan, we have nearly 16 to 18 Yupa inscriptions. And this is, and in fact, I worked upon, of course, not published my thesis on this Vedic literature with epigraphical reference. I have done it. A particular section I have devoted on the Yupa inscription.
We
Last,
have found this Yupa word on the manuscript sources.
Yes, you have.
Finds
You
this a
have.
figure of
Definitely, yes. Even Ashwamedha, you have that beautiful pillar there where the sacrificial horse is Ashwamedha type you have. Wonderful. And this, even Satavahana period also, a lion, seated lion is shown with Shobhana Gokhale has edited earlier in one of the volumes. And in the end, there was a conference here, of course, Asian Encounters earlier. There I have tried to make a comparative study of the Yupa inscription, Indian Yupa inscriptions and those found at Borneo. There also inscriptions are there, Mulavarman's inscription. It is, it's not published so far, but I made a comparative study of those and I will not go into that. But if it is published, please look into the article. Yupa. From Mulavarman, from Borneo. See, this Yupa will have an octagonal pillar and it's all specified later, earlier they used to have wooden pillars of octagonal nature, normally for Ashwamedha sacrifice. For Rajasuya, Vajapaya, they have defined in different way. Particularly for Ashwamedha sacrifice, a pillar should have octagonal base with cloth strung like that. And later, as a prototype, they made in stone because they want to carve inscription on that. Wooden will not remain, so to immolate an animal, they had the wooden pillar. Subsequently, they put up a stone inscription recording that I performed such a yaga on such a day. Even you have got lot of Greek inscriptions which says that Ashwamedha sacrifice performed. And earlier you have got Dhanabhut, that Pushyagupta inscription having a performance of 2 Ashwamedha sacrifice. So it is an octagonal. It depends on the. It is all defined by the ritual, Sutra and so many. So they followed that. I am just giving an example how Ashwamedha sacrifice would have an octagonal pillar. They have defined how many feet it should be, which tree you have to choose. All the details are given in the literature. Particular tree you have to choose. It should be how much height. All specified. So Pratima Shasana you have already seen in our museums. How in the pedestal it may be Buddha or Mahavira or any Vishnu image, any image. It is called Pratima Shasana. And Kraya Shasana is a sailting. And then Vijay Shasana, in victory, miracle, all of you know, stone inscription, and Mahasati stone. These they have seen from the point of view of sculpture and everything, but still one of you can work on the Mahasati or Veerigal stone, the the epigraphical point of view. Many have seen from the sculptural and other point of view, but you can look from the epigraphical point of view. This is the case of.
Also, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, both Vijay Sasana as well as Jayapatra are both for victory.
Yeah, both are for.
So why two names?
Huh?
Why two names?
No, that occurs in inscription. They have tried to adopt the same name. In the end of the inscription, they say Jayapatra, Vijayapatra. So that is how they have tried to adopt both the nomenclature in the class.
Both means the same, right?
Both mean the same. It is inscription terminology in the next place. So this is what I would like to say. How, apart from political history, how one should view. Next. See, inscriptions are. There is a chapter in what are the merits and demerits of inscription. There are certain things, but normally it's a contemporary record. Inscription you have to take, and this particular presentation there is a more thrust on the inscriptions from Karnataka. See, I have taken few inscriptions from Karnataka, of course some from North also. It is not a very comprehensive, I am not taken from all the regions. So the presentation is based, some important inscriptions from Karnataka I have tried to give. There is this one, Indians lack the historical sense. It is not so. When you look into the inscription of Kharavela or look inscription of Rajatarangini or the Rudradaman inscription, they could take back the history to 3 centuries or 4 centuries. They did definitely have the historical sense. Not about the contemporary history. There are some inscriptions which take us to the earlier phase and make us understand what happened 300 years or 400 years. Or in sequence they narrated the achievements of Kharavela in sequence. So this is more or less a contemporary thing, but it takes us back to some earlier period also to know the history. Next please. So apart from being a political document, inscriptions are endowed with great cultural significance. Perhaps there is no aspect of life which is not touched upon in inscriptions. This is what, when I was last time looking in from Bandhogar inscription, there are a group of merchants who travelled. There is one around 19 to 20 more inscriptions are there. I was rather surprised to know there is a reference to Vyayamashala. The merchants who come and stay, they can also do the building, do exercise. So such a rare reference, apart from the rooms and other habitational things, they also did for to do some gymnastics. Vyayamashala, Bandhogar inscription.
Approximately which time period?
See, that is 6th or 7th century inscription. There is a Bandhogar inscription from Madhya Pradesh. Bandhogar. Ruler. No, it is no ruler, specific ruler mentioned. It's all a group of merchants, they used to come and settle and they carved some inscription. It is no specific, but calligraphically it is dated to 6th, 7th century. When you, I can't give exact reference, it is in Epigraphy Indica. A group, all Bandhogar inscription, when you see Lahari's index, you will find Bandhogar inscription. Better read all the inscription. It's a very interesting inscription. You may find, why I am citing, you may find some interesting information other than the political thing.
Sir, where were the merchants from?
From all over.
From Gujarat or from some other place? Because we have like evidences, inscriptional evidences that Gujarat merchants used to travel through Malwa and they they used to come through Prayag and Kaushambi also
Yes.
during Guptan period. So I just want to know that after the Guptan Empire falls or declines, so the continuity of merchants are still there prevalent, or there was some?
No, it was prevalent.
So they were from Gujarat, blood.
So what is the name of that inscription?
That Bandhavgarh route was even used towards the Odisha side.
Yes.
which
Yeah.
was the
Puri, it
river.
goes
Yeah.
towards Puri.
So basically from
6th century we have the increase of inscription in Odisha. It's the number of inscription in Odisha.
What is the name of that inscription, sir?
Bandhavgarh.
It is a specific Bandhavgarh inscription. It is one article containing 20 inscriptions, all small inscriptions. If you see the index Bandhavgarh inscription, you will get the entire thing. It is one small reference. So this, as students of history, not reveal, explain anything further, but only I want to see how a single inscription can be seen in different perspectives. As a historian, you may look for some political history. As a student of the Sanskrit literature, you can look for Sanskrit elements or poetic elements in inscription. As a semantic, you may see some other linguistic aspect. And the paleographer will look in. So, how do you view? See, only don't see epigraphical only from a particular restricted sense. I want to emphasize, drive home the point, view inscription from different point of view. You may have specific interest, but then see what other things are hidden. See, at the outset, no, inscription doesn't appear very thing, but you have to delve deep into it, see in a very specific manner, then you will unearth how a two-line inscription, how Dr. Sarkar could write 6 pages on it, but all the interpretation, how they develop, how they interpret, we will end up in 1 page after all, giving a translation or some view. But how they it is vast reading, how to relate things, how to, so that you have to develop. And another thing, please don't depend only on the secondary source. I have seen many students coming to the department, sir, ये report दीजिए sir, थोड़ा उसको note करेगा, बस चला गया. So, please go to the transcripts, original inscription. If you have doubt anywhere in your field work, go and re-examine, improve it. Don't say what is given already there, it is a very brief note. It is not an elaborate note. You can come to the department, see what the original inscription says, because as Dr. Ramesh used to say, in the earlier phase, there were so many hundreds of inscriptions, the scholars didn't have much time. So they briefly reflected only the object of the inscription. In the annual report, you see only a brief report, brief object. So when you re-examine, you find more inscription embedded, hidden in the inscription. So this is very important. As researchers, you have to time limit, so many factors are there, but unfortunately they depend to a large extent what is rewritten, what is secondary source, they just do. So to make your own original contribution, please look into the original system. Next. So this about the social conditions to which it belongs. Next please. So we have, of course, I have chosen Vijayanagar inscription. So how a religious dispute is settled, you will come to know. Vaishnava here and a Jaina preacher. So king intervenes and tries to settle the issue, making. Once in Vijayawada there was this one, when I was speaking about the Ashokan rock edicts and all, he was asking what relevance it has got for the modern generation. I told it has plenty of sting in FM, this one, and what a few months before the intolerance was raging all around, this our look into our ancient wisdom, what they say, what they preserve, it is only that tolerance. Treat the neighbor and treat your friendly neighbor, all the messages for the younger generation only, what is hidden in the, what is said in the Ashokan rock edicts. So it has message, every inscription has relevance for the modern times also. as I was told the other day when Nagaswamy was speaking to you about, I was told about the Uttarmeru inscription. It is how the present day in a fair, free, where we conduct the elections. It is from that Uttarmeru what happened 1000 years before. So we have definitely picked up lot of leaves from the earlier history and modified according to our present leave. It is not something irrelevant. History has its own thing. What we are today, see, without past there is no present, and without present there cannot be a future. So it is all in one continuity time, flux of time, everything you have to place and look into. So epigraphy, somebody will question you, what is we now use in studying epigraphy? It's an obsolete. You are technical IT man. Look from different angle what it has got used. So definitely what we are today, these of our predecessors, what the knowledge or wisdom they have given, you have to educate your child like that. You can avoid lot of suicidal, so many attempts with children are because they are stressed. You have to relieve them. Take it to a museum, explain the artistry or the inscription. You can make them lively. Why as parents we are not failing? Why we don't have time? So that's why I have got to BHEL and many things. Though I have other presentation, I am trying home the parents. What is the relevance in going in Kharagpur? I told you maybe from IT and the business, engineering sector, that doesn't preclude to know our heritage. What it doesn't prevent? The archaeological evidence, epigraphical heritage. It's a very big subject. Now everybody should know to appreciate our aesthetic value, what our predecessors have done. Next, please. And this very important, which is a great knowledge, Varadakshina, Kanyashulka, is again a Vijayanagar inscription. It's a punishment. Social excommunication is to be there, and it is to be punished. Even sometime before, the Supreme Court asked, what are all the punishments that are mentioned? You have epigraphical references. Though there are not major capital punishment like that, for doing adultery, for doing any social, there are some specific punishments mentioned. So this Kanya Shulka and Varadakshina, in any marriage agreement, has threatened to punishment by the king for social exclusion from the community.
So what was this exactly, the Kanya Shulka?
See, at the time of marriage, a girl will be given as a dowry, this one. Here, at the groom side, demanding for marriage, what you have now the dowry. It's nothing but dowry. For marriage, you have to give this much amount. It's going everywhere. So this is the Kanya Shulka. And Varadakshina, whatever you call it. And there, you can't give the Varadakshina. So it is but prevalent in northern part of Karnataka, even in Rajasthan. It's a very big melody social going on. But in the Vijayanagar we have an example where punishment is there.
And so these belong to approximately which period?
15th century. Vijayanagar.
15th century.
Most of them I have chosen from Krishnadevaraya's inscriptions. Next, please. And what are the privileges? Social privileges like bride and bridegroom riding a horse in procession, being allowed by the royal command, is also gathered from inscription. They were given a special Bharat privilege. Next. See, inscriptions also throw light on social customs. Brahmadeva refers to Sati. So we have lot many. How only as a pointer I am mentioning one or two instances. There are hundreds of inscriptions which cite about the Sati, and this being the earlier inscription. Brahmadeva, it refers to Sati, committed by Rajendra's Chola's queen. It refers to. Next, please. So this, no, I am trying to tell what are all the aspects you can look for the inscriptions. Now this economic aspect is very important. There are many people who have worked on the agrarian system, irrigation system, and so many aspects. Agriculture, as a primary occupation was revealed by many records. Our forefathers bestowed great care and attention system of irrigation. What are the tanks, how the irrigation, especially Chola, later Chola and Vijayanagar, we have number of inscriptions. There are already books regarding that. Next please. Now again I have reverted back to an earlier inscription, Junagadh Rudradaman, how the lake Sudarshana was constructed during the reign of Chandragupta Maurya, and its conduits were set up during the reign of Ashoka. So this gives a history, particularly with regard to the water system or water management. Next please. See later how it was repaired. First during the reign of Rudradaman and subsequently in the Gupta period during the reign of Chandragupta II. So this through these inscriptions we come to know. And there are many inscriptions during Paramar or Chandela, how they dug well, and they just named it after the king also, Mahendra Varma or any such king. For example, I am just giving, they took a lot of activities to see that the lakes and wells are created. Now, whether you go to Bangalore, any metros, all dry. There is no lakes surrounding you. Apartments are coming, and where are the water source? So, how earlier people, they took maximum care to create some water, whether for the animal or man. It was a great necessity, and they were very good in that. Though with a minimum populace, they thought of all the things. Now we are in Stockholm, they will do the World Water Week or whatever they deliberate, but the problem persists, water. Next please. So this economic terms, you will find a large number of inscriptions like Shreshti, Sarkava, Vanija, about guilds, business guilds. It's a very interesting aspect. You get a large number of inscriptions from South, Ayapade, Ayapade, and many other inscriptions from South as well as Northern India. Mandasur inscription also, we have got silk merchants, guilds. This is an area which, of course, an exhaustive work has not been made so far. So far, it's of perfunctory nature. Here and there, they have picked up some examples and tried to write. But it could be a good work if you can look from all the North Indian inscriptions. Even you go to the earlier Prakrit phase also, you look for some good information. You get a lot of terms, and this is how when I address some MBA students, the banking, whatever, we give modern terminology, but what was there earlier, we are trying to put in the modern way. So these are the different Sarkavaha, especially the Karwan, who keeps moving from place to place, and Vanija. These are all traders. Next please. Because they have told Ayavade, Ainur inscription. Arvattu Ainuru. These are the famous mercantile guilds which carried on trade with other countries also, and as gleaned from inscriptions. Next, please.
So which inscription is
Aihole. This is from inscription from Aihole. Specific I have not taken, but this is from Aihole. One of the inscriptions from Aihole. Taken.
Sir, just previous.
Previous, yeah. Ainur Truvar is 500, that is guild comprising of 500 merchants.
Sir, Ayuratavar is also Ayuratavar.
Yeah, that is also there.
These are all merchants in particular place. Why it is called Ayuratavar?
No, they don't. They comprise of 500 the units, like 500, 1,000, like that.
There are 500 members.
Members comprising the guild.
So what would be the time period for this?
These are 6th, 7th century. Next, please. So, about weights and standards, what measures we have. There are a lot of Chola inscriptions, early inscriptions, refers to Vadivel Vidagu, Pandarakkal, and these are all the stones, they use. You may find many more references, and I'm not going into a particular aspect, only want to tell there is no aspect left out in epigraphical work, like tax terms, like weights and measures, all are found. You may try to find something on fine arts, you look into epigraphs. So like that I am telling. Whichever area you may like, you look from that angle, try to gather some information that would be very useful. Because in the course of donation, there may be other reference to some other terms. Next. So, as I referred, taxes. The taxes such as Irai, Kadamai, Echuru, Vetti. There are hundreds and terms, in fact, Dr. Ramesh has brought out through ICHR only the economic and social terms. Unfortunately, it could come up to few alphabets up to D or E, something like that. Starting further, he could not complete that. In the meanwhile, he is no more. But he started the economic term because as an epigraphist of any language, whether he could deal with the Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, Sanskrit, fluently, this one, command over all this one, he could handle those things. But only one volume has come. Further things could not. But Professor Subrayalo, I think he has taken up in continuation of that work.
Volume 1.
Huh? It is in ICHR.
No, what is the book title?
Socio-economic terms.
Socio-economic terms and
by Dr. P.V. Ramesh. I think first available here.
Sir, can you specify each or and Veti taxes?
Irai,
Each or and Veti. Okay?
Kadamai, and Ichor,
Each or and
Vetti. These termina I can't explain because I don't know exact Tamil, but these are all connected with agricultural products. Ichoru, these are all when it is produced. Some terms have. It is from the cultivator stage to collect the tax. Next, please. So now let us look into the religious aspects. Next, please. Again, I am reverting back to an earlier inscription of Heliodorus, where you have, there are many umpteen inscriptions which says about the, but as an example I am telling, to know about the Bhagavata cult and Vaishnavism, how through inscription we can build. Even in Mysore, I conduct some thematic inscriptions like Jainism through the ages, Buddhism through the ages. Like that, we have got lot of inscriptions could arrange in chronological sequence from different dynasties. You can take any aspect. Earlier you might have heard Dr. M.S. Nagaraj Rao, former Director General. He wanted us to go to the schools, education system as reflected in inscriptions, administration